forest. So, how do you build a road that a community desperately needs when the only path forward is through a protected forest? It's that classic dilemma, right? Development versus conservation. But, Nepal's laws are actually designed to tackle this head on, not by blocking progress, but by creating a really careful balancing act.
Okay, so let's put you in the situation. Imagine a remote village, totally cut off. A simple road could change everything. Access to markets, schools, healthcare, you name it. But the only possible route cuts right through a community forest, a forest that local people depend on and that protects the whole ecosystem. So what do? Do you sacrifice the forest for the road or the road for the forest? Well, the answer might not be what you think. It's actually neither.
And this brings us right to the central question. Vikas ki Van Sanrakshan, development or forest conservation? For so long, people saw this as a zero-sum game, an impossible choice. But what's fascinating is that Nepal's legal framework totally reframes the question. It shows that with the right process, you can actually have both.
And the key here is that Nepal's Forest Act and forest rules, they're not meant to be permanent roadblocks. It's better to think of them like a guidebook, really. They lay out a very specific, very regulated path that allows essential projects to use forest land, but, and this is a big but, only when it's absolutely necessary and done in a responsible way.
And this law isn't just a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. It's smart. It actually differentiates between different types of projects. So for something like a road, the big priorities are cutting the absolute minimum number of trees and using things like bioengineering to keep the land stable. But for, say, drinking water or irrigation, the focus shifts. It's all about protecting that precious water source and causing as little damage as possible when you're laying the pipeline. See? It's a nuanced system designed for specific impacts.
So you might be asking, how does this actually work on the ground? Well, let's walk through the Mukhya Prakriyagat Haru. These are the main steps that take a project from just an idea to getting the final approval.
Okay, so there are 4 key stages, and none of them are optional. First, the project has to prove, and I mean prove, that there are no other viable alternatives. Using forest land has to be the absolute last resort. Second, a super detailed environmental study has to be done to figure out the impact and how to reduce it. Third, and this is absolutely critical, the local community forest user group has to give their formal consent. Without that, it's a non-starter. And finally, of course, it needs official government approval to move forward.
Right. A process like this, as you can imagine, involves a good bit of paperwork. So let's take a look at the Abhishek Kanuni Pravadhan Rakagajat. Basically, the required legal stuff and all the documents. You can think of this as the official checklist for doing development the right way.
The whole system really rests on 3 key pieces of legislation. You've got the Forest Act, which is what allows forest land to be used for these priority projects in the first place. Then you have the forest rules, which get into the nitty-gritty, the step-by-step procedures. And finally, the Environment Protection Act, which is what makes those environmental studies, like an IEE or a full-blown EIA, a mandatory part of the process.
So when a project is ready to submit its file, it needs to come with the whole package. We're talking a detailed proposal, maps with GPS coordinates showing the exact area, a report that literally counts every single tree that's going to be affected, and of course, that all-important consent letter from the community user group. Every one of these documents is there for a reason, to make the entire process transparent and hold everyone accountable.
Now, there's a really crucial legal concept here called bhogadikar. And what this means is that when a project gets approval, it's granted a right of use, not ownership. This is so important. The land isn't being sold or transferred. It stays community forest land. The project just gets a permit to operate there for a specific purpose and for a limited amount of time.
And what about the trees that do get cut down? Is there any compensation? Absolutely. For every single tree that's cut, the law says the project has to plant and take care of 10 to 25 new trees for 5 years. Or they have to pay into a forest development fund. It's a way to directly and tangibly pay back the environmental cost.
Okay, so we mentioned that not all projects are treated the same, right? Let's compare 2 of the most common ones, roads and drinking water projects. Sadak Raka Anapani. What's really the difference in how they're handled?
Well, the legal approach is different simply because the impact is so different. Drinking water is seen as a fundamental human need, and the project's, pipelines often run underground with very little surface disturbance. Because of that, the process can be a bit more flexible. Road construction, on the other hand, that has a massive impact on both the land and the trees.
So as you'd expect, the process is way stricter and demands extensive proof that there is simply no other way to build it. And this scaled approach also applies to the environmental reviews. A small water project might just need a pretty simple assessment, but for roads, the level of scrutiny just keeps going up with the project's size. A little rural road might need a basic study. A bigger district road needs what's called an Initial Environmental Examination, or IEE, and a major highway, that requires a full-scale Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA. The bigger the impact, the deeper the look.
And for road projects, there are some very specific, very practical rules they have to follow. For instance, the construction company can't just dump all the excavated soil and rocks down the hillside into the forest below. Nope, a designated tipping site has to be identified beforehand and used properly to manage all that debris. It's all about preventing further damage to the ecosystem.
Now this next point is a really powerful one, and it's all about resource rights. Any timber that comes from the trees that have to be cut for the project, it doesn't belong to the construction company. It belongs to the community forest user group. This is huge because it ensures that the local community, the actual stewards of the forest, are the ones who directly benefit from its resources, not the project developer.
All right, so let's pull all these threads together now and look at the Santalit Vikaskobato, the path to balanced development. This is the entire approval chain, from a local idea all the way to a nationally approved project.
So the whole journey starts at the grassroots level, with the community's consent. From there, it moves up to the district level for a technical review by the Division Forest Office. Then the file goes even higher, to the provincial or federal ministry. And for the biggest, most significant projects, the final decision is made by the Council of Ministers itself. It's only after all of these checks and balances are passed that a formal agreement is finally signed.
And all of this leaves us with one final big question. When you look at all these steps, all these requirements,